keep my art expenses low as a retired artist? One of the things I love most about retirement is having the time to create. I can paint when I want. I can sketch in the morning after my coffee. I can spend an afternoon experimenting with color, and there are no deadlines. And no one is asking me to hurry. And I don't have to turn my creativity into a business. But there is one little problem with being an artist. Art can get expensive, quite expensive, but there is always another brush to buy, another canvas, another tube of paint, another sketchbook, another easel, another gadget. And the stores are full of them. And they promise to make you a better artist. And if I'm not careful, I can spend more money on buying art supplies than actually making art. So over time, I have developed a few simple rules that help me to keep my art expenses low. And the first one is probably the most important one. I use what I already have. I have learned that I don't need to buy something every time I feel like. In fact, often I discover that I already have what I need. I have half-used tubes of paint. I have the brushes that I haven't touched in months, and I have canvases tucked away somewhere. I have sketchbooks with perfectly good blank pages. I just have to find them. And sometimes I find myself looking at all these supplies and thinking, why am I buying more? So I have started challenging myself to use what I already own. And it's almost like becoming a creative exercise. It's very interesting. So instead of asking, what should I buy? I ask, what can I make with what I have? And surprisingly, that question can lead some interesting paintings. I don't need every color. And this was a difficult lesson for me. Artists love to buy art supplies. You walk into an art store and you see all those beautiful tubes lined up. 4 kinds of white, 6 kinds of blacks, and you need every shade of blue, really. Every green, every pink, so many yellows. But I have learned that I can mix a surprising number of colors from a relatively small palette. So instead of buying every color that catches my eye, I try to become better at mixing the colors that I need with the colors that I already have. And honestly, there is something very satisfying about mixing a color. And I can write a whole book on that. And it's so amazing to be able to do that in practice, even though I know all the theories. But instead of buying more colors, if I just use the colors that I have and create the colors that I need, it keeps my creative juices flowing really well, I find. So, you don't have to buy all the possible materials, is what I'm trying to say. And also brushes, right? The cheapest brushes, they do break quite easily, and the cheapest canvases, they don't behave the way I want. So you have to buy relatively good art supplies and then learn how to take care of it. It's more about value than rather simply a price. And if there is something I use constantly, I'll spend a little bit more for it than for something that I don't need that much. If I use it constantly, my extra $10 on that is well spent, I find. I need something that works well for me. And if the cost is not too high, I would probably get it. And I'm not trying to build the world's most impressive art supply collection. And so I'm not an art store, so I don't need to have everything. And I don't buy supplies just because they're on sale either. Sometimes I've done that and I've repented because I never use that. So buying on sale is not a good idea. Just buy what you need and then use it. And if you don't have a use of it, probably, find a use for it and use it up, because sometimes paint also, they dry up in the tube. I have had some, really reputable companies' paints that I bought for a lot of money, and I didn't use it for a year maybe, and to my surprise, I found that it has completely dried up inside the tube, and it's an acrylic paint, so I cannot rejuvenate it. So, and quite a few of these paints, they dried up, and people told me that I should contact the manufacturer, but really I put the blame on myself. I probably didn't close it tightly, or why did I need cobalt turquoise blue anyways, I asked myself. So just stick to the basic colors and then just try to use them, and I think we're going to be okay. The more things you buy, you'll need more space, and it just becomes a overwhelming practice. Things will be everywhere, and practicing art is a whole thing, and it can get really busy with different things that you want to do, all the different styles, all the different mediums, and you have to keep a tight control on it if you want to do it long term. So my suggestion is just watch your spending, spend where you need to, and keep your practice. Important thing is to practice the art, right? And that's the joy of being an artist. So I don't waste paint. Paint can disappear very quickly, especially when I'm excited and squeezing it too much onto my palette. And so I have become much conscious of how much paint I actually need, and I start with less, and then I can always add more. And when I have leftover paint, I don't automatically throw it away. Sometimes I use it for a background, create an abstract study, do a color study, do a little sketch or an experimental painting, somehow use it up. And sometimes I would combine all the colors that I have left over and put it into a small bottle. And next day or that week, I would use that and repurpose it, and somehow use it up in my next painting. And sometimes I've even used cardboard. Cardboard is a very good thing. It can become a palette. It can be a test piece for a new painting. It can be used for color study. And so I have some little scrap pieces of cardboard that I cut to size, and I store them and I use that. It's better than just tossing it away in the recycling bin, and might as well make use of it. And acrylic goes very well on cardboard actually, and it's a good substrate. So I would use that. I use a lot of paper for my painting as well, and paper is very easy to store, and especially watercolor paper. I sometimes bought watercolor paper pads and cut it up into smaller pieces, and I would use that for doing acrylic painting. I have even used oil paint. I have even used oil paint on watercolor paper after I put a few layers of gesso on it, and I can store those paintings in a small storage area, and this is how you'd um, save money. Instead of spending on expensive canvases, you can paint on paper, especially the experimental pieces, right? And so I keep my studio practice. I'm not a minimalist, but I still try to use some judgment about where I'm spending the money to and how I'm spending the money, and do I really need it? Because at the beginning of my art career, I bought a lot of supplies too. I bought, acrylic ink, alcohol ink, inks of different type, paints of different type, watercolors, acrylics, oils, pastels, charcoal, you name it, I got it. But I somehow ended up using all of them because I also teach. So I experiment with all of these materials and I use them for my teaching. And so they have done me well. The benefit is I don't need to buy very many paints anymore or many different types of things anymore. I do need to invest more now on framing or paper and things like that, and it doesn't take that much money. The expensive part is over, I feel. Now I have to just be very considerate and make sure that my paint don't dry up, and I close the lids properly, I wash my brushes well, and that's how I keep my expenses low for my art practice or art business, whatever you want to call it. And my biggest rule is I don't want to become someone who is constantly preparing, to create, buying supplies, organizing supplies, watching videos about supplies, reading reviews about supplies, looking at other people's studios and comparing and planning the perfect setup, and never actually painting. My main goal is to paint. And so is to pick up the brush and to make something, because that's what I really want to do. And I don't want to be a collector of art supplies. I want to collect experiences. I want to, remember the afternoon I painted outside, the morning that I watched the light change, and the painting that didn't work but taught me something, and the little sketch I made, while traveling. Those are the things I want to keep. These are the memories that I want to keep, the experiences that I want to keep. And having the art supplies, it's gonna work out, trust me. So make time for doing those artworks and being creative. And you don't have to sell it, you don't have to post it, I don't have to impress anyone, I don't have to justify the time or the money. I can simply enjoy the process. And that has actually made me more careful with how much money I spend with my art supplies, because I want to take the pressure away. And I realize I don't need nearly as much art supply, and I don't need the perfect studio. I don't need every new product. I don't need every color, every expensive equipment. I need to invest in the practice of art. I need to inspire myself and continue to be inspired and have the desire to produce the art. And the real luxury isn't having an enormous collection of art supply, it's having the time to use them. And that's something I remind myself very much. And I really need the time to spend in my studio practicing my art, and because that is what is important. So I want to carry on with what supplies I have, and I want to develop a community where we can share with each other and come up with ideas about the art supplies. So put in your comment what art supplies you have in your studio that you don't know how to use it, and maybe together we can come up with some use. So let's give that a try. Okay, and thank you for listening to my video. Please like and subscribe. I hope to see you again in my channel. Bye for now.